So far we haven't talked at all about how to change colors using graphics, so that's what I want to talk about in this video. For example, say I want to draw a disk that's centered at 0, 0 and with radius 1. So to draw it, I put it inside this keyword graphics. And the keyword for changing the color is going to be the word hue, H-U-E. So let me show you almost how to do it. I could write, for example, hue brackets 1, comma. This doesn't quite work. This gives me an error message, and to get it to work, we have to put them inside a list. So here's a length 2 list. The first element in the list is the hue. The second element in the list is the disk. And if I draw this, now it works. So maybe you think we can change the hue by going to 2, for example, or going to 3, but they all look the same. And the reason behind that is that this number that goes inside of the hue brackets, all it cares about is the decimal that comes after the number. So for example, instead of 3, I could do 3.14. And now that's a different color. If I do 3.1, that's a slightly different number. But if I were to do 2.1, that's exactly the same number, or 223.1, that's exactly the same number. So all that matters is what comes to the right of the decimal point. Another thing you might think is that we could put it on either side of the disk. Hey, maybe you think all that matters is that it's in a little length 2 list with disk. But let's try this. Let's go back to hue 1. And that looks just like it did without any hue. So for example, if I get rid of it, that looks exactly the same. And so it turns out that the hue specification, that has to come before the disk. So that works. Or 0.1, that works. And so on. What if I want to show a bunch of different hues? One way to do that is using a command we haven't talked about called manipulate. And what's the idea behind manipulate? Well, it's going to use iterators just like table does or just like sum does. And what comes after the comma is going to be one of these iterators. So for example, I'm going to want the hue to go from 0 to 1, going up by 0.1. So let's do that. From 0 to 1 up by, I might have said 0.1, but let's do 0.01. And then what goes before the comma? Well, it's just whatever you want to evaluate in Mathematica. So let's do this whole thing. So I get this little slider bar, and I can move along it. Okay, you can see that these I values, here it says I on the left, these I values, they're changing from 0 up to 1, and they're going up by 0.01. But nothing's changing in the picture. Why is that? Well, the variable that's changing is I, and the thing I'm evaluating, that doesn't depend on I at all. So if I wanted to depend on I, the most obvious way is to have this hue part, have the 0.1, have that replaced by I. And now let's look at it. You can see as I drag the slider bar, the colors are changing. And I think the ability to do these kind of interactive graphics, I think that's one of the coolest things about Mathematica. I could also do a very similar thing using the word animate instead of manipulate. And what this does is it just runs it automatically for me. So I'm not dragging the slider bar at all. It's just changing on its own. What if I also had this part depend on I? How would that look? Well, let's have the radius also depend on I. Let's have it 0.5 plus I. So it looks like it's not changing at all. And the reason for that is because as the radius of the disk is changing, also the dimensions that Mathematica shows are changing. So if I want to have it more obvious that it's changing, I can go into this graphics part. And I can say, after this list, I can say plot range. Let's have it be from -2 to 2, -2 to 2. Okay, so there we can see the plot range is staying the same for all of them. If I want, I could also show the axes to make it more obvious that it's changing. So instead of just saying the plot range, I can say axes, let's show these, axes true. And so what's the radius going between? The smallest it ever gets is 0.5. The biggest it ever gets is 1 plus 0.5. So if I were to keep everything the same but get rid of this 0.5 plus, how would it look? Okay, now instead of going from 0.5 to 1.5, it's going from 0 up to 1.